Hello, my name is Connor,
And I'm Jason.
and you're listening to the Amazed and Perplexed podcast. I'm really excited to be back with you all, especially Jason with his NPR voice. I can't go there with him, but Jason, just in case anybody hasn't heard or didn't listen to my brief thing, what's been going on with you for the past few weeks?
Well, it's really been going on the last 10 years, but yeah, I developed periodically I'll develop a granuloma on my vocal cord, and my remedies have not this time haven't been enough, and so the doctor put me on vocal rest, and so I did that for 2 weeks, and now I feel sore right now, some, but I'm in the rebuilding process, I guess you could say.
Cool. So we are not going to take up too much of your time today, but I just kind of wanted to explore what that's like, especially for your job, where your job is basically to talk to people, to talk through things, to work through things with people. And you did find a way to do that in a really cool way that we'll talk about. But it's such a fascinating idea to think about the idea of a preacher, a minister, taking away, like, what is it like to live that life when you take away what everybody would assume is the number one tool for it. So I want to hear what was the biggest encouragement you had from your 3 weeks of silence?
The biggest was the response from people, the support. I think that I hope that other churches would be very supportive if their minister ran into this. I have experiences in my past that would say it wouldn't be as smooth, and I'm very blessed because I have other people that can easily. I share my preaching role with somebody else, so I have a benefit that a lot of preachers don't. But in general, it's just the support. It was really through the roof, and the understanding. And there was this part. Well, I'll leave it there. That's been the biggest thing. Is just it's been a constant encouragement. And to be frank, I miss it. Like, when you're getting that much encouragement all the time.
Sure.
I'm like, man, this is sweet. So I did really appreciate that.
See, for me, the thing that I would be like, I can imagine myself in that situation. The thing that I would miss would be having so much less social obligation. That would be just an absolute dream for me.
Right.
But okay, so here's a silly question. Did you have a plan for, like, if you got pulled over driving somewhere, like how you were going to communicate, or did you have like a paper written out or something like that?
I didn't. I do have a funny story I can tell you about writing. So I carried a legal pad everywhere, and I filled 3 or 4 of them. So we had got something from Dollar Tree, a bunch of something, and I was like, we're just going to throw it away. That's like $18, $20. We should go back, So I had the opportunity. So I went in, and I went to the lady at the register. They don't have a returns thing at Dollar Tree, a set-aside thing. And I said, I motioned, I don't talk, and I had written on my paper, may I have a refund for this? Have my receipt, have everything ready. And this girl, she's probably, she was young, but it was like it scared her. It freaked her out. And so she panicked, and she didn't talk. And this is the funny dynamic. A lot of times when I didn't talk, people would either whisper or they would stop talking and kind of gesture, And so she kind of panics, and she's like, hold on, And so then she goes and finds a manager. The manager comes out and starts to talk to me. The worker whispers something in her ear, and the manager goes, oh, hold on. And she goes into her office. So she's in there scrambling. You can hear it. She's scrambling, looking. And it probably takes, the whole interaction should have taken 30 seconds, with what I was about to find out. But it probably takes 3-4 minutes that she's in there digging around and stuff. So she comes out, and I realize she has written down her response to me.
Oh, man.
And I was like, I can hear, like I'm motioning, I can hear. And at the end of the day, just for everybody, this is a PSA. For Dollar Tree, you can't get a refund, but you can exchange. And so all of that. So instead of getting a 30-second answer, which was fine, it's like 5 minutes later. And of course, Dollar Tree, a lot of times they only have one register open. So now the line, so I've got an audience building.
I would be so furious with you if I was in that line.
Oh,
so I've got a funny, similar story. So Hannah, my wife, she actually went to school to be a sign language interpreter. And so at one point she was pretty fluent. She hasn't done it in a while, but she can still get by. And she's been co-leading worship at this church. And nobody there knew that she could speak sign language. And just one random Sunday morning, a couple weeks ago, a guy walked in. He was deaf, and the head pastor and the worship pastor that she's working with were trying to communicate, and it was not going well at all. And they were really flustered. They're trying same sort of thing. They're trying to get something to write on, trying to figure it out. Like, I think they're trying to do like a text to speech app on their phone, and he just comes in and signs, and the guy's like, oh, thankfully somebody with some brains here to figure out the situation. But I thought it was really funny because they had no idea that was like something that Hannah did, and they were like treated her like a superhero for the rest of the day. So how transitioning away from story time, how did you go about let me get this and then we'll go to the last question. Obviously you spent most of your time listening. Did you notice anything different about the process of listening to God during the time when you can't speak?
I would love to say yes. I can, being in silence doesn't mean you not talking doesn't mean you're in silence. Yeah. And I tend to fill the gaps with a lot of distraction just in my normal life, which is one of those things that if I waved the magic wand and I never felt a need to do that, I know my life would be richer and fuller and more resonating, but here we are. So, but I did take several times just to spend an hour in silence, meaning not just my silence, but all silence, and that is always a huge blessing to me. And it's just, it relaxes the whole day, kind of thing. And I did love that. And it's something I could do anytime. It just you feel so much more compelled. If you have things on your to-do list, you just got to do them, And what's funny is if you're distracting yourself, you don't think about your to-do list. But once you sit down in silence, all you can think of is your to-do list, And so really being able to identify that and being able to just continue to make the choice, that is something I can think about later. Once this dedicated time is done, I can do that later. I think in general, there was just a lot of, it felt renewing. The time did feel renewing, and the time in the sense of connected with God. And then I think you'll lead into this next, but the listening piece in general was just really helpful. And I think as you listen to people, I think we create these strong barriers between I'm listening to God, now I'm listening to people. And I think God speaks through people. And I don't think that barrier is that strong. And so they really tie into each other.
So yeah, you are right. That's kind of where I was going. So what's really interesting to me is if this happened to me, and I was working at a church like the church you work at, which is very like forgiving and is very like, man, they're so accommodating. That's the word I was looking for. It's so accommodating, and so not that like, what have you done for me lately sort of thing. I've been like, sweet, a free vacation. I don't have to listen to anybody. I don't have to talk to anybody. I'm just going to stay home, watch TV, play video games and all the good stuff. But you chose, to do the responsible and smart thing. And so how did you go about ministering to people during this time?
Well, just to take a step back from that, the reason I did the listening tour is what I called it, is two things happen. And this is kind of how God works, at least in my life, these weird kind of things. Gary and Michelle Ford, who are missionaries in Thailand, were in town, and I basically had one day to talk to them. And I couldn't talk to them. So I thought, man, they're worth it, So I went and just sat with them, and they talked, and I wrote, and then I got an email or a text, something from a guy that said, hey, I think you should lean into this fully. Don't let this slow you down. And so those two things kind of, coalescing, That's where the idea, I put it on Facebook, and I ended up, I think, having, I mean, I could go back and count for sure, but I think I set out, I opened up 10 spots each week, for the 2 fundamental weeks that I was doing this. And I think I did end up doing it with 18, 19, 20 people. The thing that was most interesting, there's a lot that was interesting. Number one, it changes the dynamic dramatically if they know you're not going to talk. Because even with my writing, I recognize pretty quickly, if you write more than 3 lines, people start losing connection, So I had to keep it really concise. And I would make statements at times if the emotional need was there, but mostly I tried to do it with questions, And some people I was more successful than others with that. But the dynamic of being able, not being expected to talk was very relieving to me. I didn't expect that. I realized that my career path has basically set me up. So for the last 25 plus years, I've basically been on a career path that when people talk to me, most of the time they're talking about a problem they're having. And most of the time they anticipate that I'm going to provide them an answer.
So I want to lean into this real quick. That you said something very specifically about the pressure being taken off, and it hit me. What we've tried to do in Amazed and Perplexed, and what we've tried to do in our Amazed and Perplexed groups, is take off the pressure of figuring out what you're going to say next. And I was processing through, like, I've never taken that to my everyday normal conversations with people. And you've sat through thousands of conversations where somebody has a problem and they want to talk it through with a minister. And I've been through dozens, not near as many as you, but there is this fascinating dynamic of trying to you're trying to listen, you're trying to like lean into what they're saying, but you're also like, okay, how do I not like, at least this is for me in my, maybe in 20 years I'll feel differently. Like, how do I really not mess this up, God? Like, how do I do the least amount of damage, or God, what do you want from me? And just constantly feeling this pressure of like, of getting lost in the moment. And so for you, there's that freeing aspect. Also, did you find yourself ever more connected with the person because you were not necessarily thinking about what am I going to say next? It was you were forced to listen. Like, did that inspire any sort of deeper connection?
Yeah, I think that's good observation. I don't know. It'd be interesting because every relationship, if I was talking to 20 strangers, we'd be having a different conversation than if I talked to 20 people I already knew, and the vast majority I already knew. And then when you know somebody, you know them in different levels of intimacy. And so I'm sure a lot of this reflects those pre-existing relationships. But I think in general, for me, I mean, I remember early on in my ministry, I would pray that the people wouldn't stop talking because they're going to get to an end and they're going to ask a question. I'm going to be expected to give a reasonable answer, and I don't know what I'm going to say, And so I have relaxed over the years in God saying, hey, if God wants me to have an answer, I'll have an answer, And I don't know if that's honest or not. Like I mean that honestly, what I just said, but I don't know that I've always waited for an answer to God to give it to the other person. In this really pushes you because you're not really expected, especially the first week. I was so tuned in to not talking. I really tried not to answer, and my natural bent came back online probably as we went, providing more counsel, but it was still very limited,
Sure.
To just a sentence or two. And so that dynamic, it was liberating. I think it became Tim Rush, the guy I work with, he said, how many people have cried in the conversations, And his anticipation is when you're talking to somebody that's only listening, more of you can come out, And I do think that's true. I do think more especially if they would finish and I would be like kind of thumbs up or nodding, giving them, yeah, thanks for sharing that, basically is what I'm communicating. And then there's a pause and then they go to the next thing. I think they shared, I think a lot of times when you get with a person that you expect to solve your problem, you don't process more than that problem, even though there's a lot more you could share, And then there's some unhealthiness to that too. I'm just reflecting right now because that means I'm only interacting with the person's problem. Like I never hear about, here's the good things in my life. You know what I mean? Because they're only engaging. Because they say a problem, I say, here's some things to think about. They typically come back and say, okay, here's what I heard you say fundamentally. What about this? What about that? I do some more problem solving. We pray. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. And this was much more wide ranging.
So that's interesting. So when you have conversations or when you're talking to somebody, let's just say over the scope of, 5-10 years, and you're getting together every now and then and talking, if it is always around problem solving, if it's always around fixing issues or, wanting issues to get better, then the relationship that is formed, or what the relationship is between you, them, and the problem. It's not between you and them necessarily. And so I'm thinking about this out loud. I'm processing, and I wonder. Okay, so this is gonna go a whole other level. I'm really fascinated by the dynamic of you're leading a church, or you have a deep spiritual relation with somebody, and then they leave the church, or they go somewhere else, so you feel like you're betrayed by them. And you'll hear this refrain from ministers and from preachers and pastors. Man, I sat down with them when their marriage was failing. I sat down with them when they lost their kid. I was constantly there, like through the whole thing, and all I got was this, lousy T-shirt, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm sure you've had that experience, that sort of thoughts and experience.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is it because so often for these people, the relationship isn't like, I had this deep connection and relationship with my pastor. It was, I had a deep relationship with my pastor and this issue. And it's not this like direct one-to-one. It's been this, we're both feeding into this problem and fixing this issue. And there's very little back and forth. So I don't know. How does that sound?
No, I totally resonate, and I've been processing this because of how I'm wired, my history, all these dynamics. I don't relate. I can't say I am the typical minister, so I don't know. I do know for me that I have poured into a lot of people, spent a lot of time, and I thought I was building relationship, and they thought they were solving a problem. And they're not bad, and I'm not bad. It's just I realize I've had my feelings hurt over and over and over again for people that I've spent a lot of time. When they call, man, I'm there and I help, and I consider it a blessing and a joy, but I put up with a lot because when you're dealing with somebody in crisis, they're in their worst space. It's just the nature of it. So it's not a complaint about that. But then once that problem's done, it's like I cease to exist to them. I can't tell you how many people I have when they're back in Tulsa and they have a need, they call me and I'll drop everything to help them. Not my family, but other than my negotiable stuff, I'll drop. And then they'll be back in town 100 other times and never call me at all. You know what I mean? And I know, it honestly, it's like, to me, it's this, man, we're building community. And to them, it's just, I mean, it's not critical, but I'm like the spiritual ATM, they put their stuff in, they get back what they need, and they move on. And you don't think about your ATM as, man, I need to go back and visit my ATM, unless you need more answers from your ATM. So functionally, ministers do serve in that spiritual ATM role. And it is one of those dynamics that is, if I keep it in proper perspective, I'm fine, because it's fine. It really is fine. Simultaneously, this is one of the reasons I didn't pursue counseling, is because I was spending so much time with people. Then I would see them out and about and couldn't even greet them, which I understand the rules and I respect the rules. They didn't fit me, you know what I mean? And so it's weird for ministers in general to have friends, because you're like, where does your ministry end and your friendship begin? It's really challenging.
And we're going to wrap up here in a bit. We're coming up on 10 minutes, and so we don't want to wear out Jason's voice. But I think there's something really interesting here, and that the conversation has led here just organically. Like, I think there's a part of what you were talking about, the feeling of betrayal sometimes, and the feeling of being used. There is an element of that where I think, man, part of that is just being like a follower of Jesus and just dying to yourself and being like, okay, this is who I need to be. But I do wonder, is the byproduct of how people view not even paid staff members of a church, but how they view spiritual leaders, is we have set up the system where you said the sentence, I thought we were building a relationship, and we were just solving a problem. And is the reason that that's so much more common is because that's how we go about church, where where some of us sit down, we think, man, we're gonna try to build a relationship here, but really we're just trying to fix the sin problem. We're just trying to fix your outlook on life. We're trying to fix your view on what happens after you die, or whatever, or how you get saved, or when you get baptized, or whatever the thing may be for you. And I'm wondering, and I think this is the byproduct. I wonder if this is the byproduct of the sermon being the center point of a gathering. Like and this is not breaking ground necessarily, but I'm processing out loud here of is this hurt magnified? Is this phenomenon magnified because of the way that we say we want to build friendships, but we're actually just trying to solve problems and fix things? That statement that you said there, there's certain times somebody will say something and it just like hits at my heart, and that sentence right there is something that's going to stick with me for a bit.
Yeah, I think it's really true. And the longer I am a minister and a disciple of Christ, and I don't have the compulsion, because I don't go to a church that really pressures me to maintain status quo. I always went to churches that had pressure. You better maintain status quo. But this is we really want to be a learning environment. But the downside with that learning environment is you learn, the way we're doing this for us, and it feels good for us, but it's not really helping people move towards Jesus. Mm-hmm. Even that relationship model, on one hand, I'm saying, so I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, I'm building relationship. Well, you can only sustain so many true relationships, mm-hmm. You know what I mean, at any depth. And so what then happens is now the other person's feelings hurt because I got to move on to the next, quote, relationship, Yeah. And we, I think in the church many times, once we build relationships in the church, we put up a protective barrier where we don't want anybody to mess that up, which directly works against us reaching out to people who need to know Jesus. So it's the whole human condition is messed up, but you are right. There is this part in our culture that magnifies it.
Well, I think that this is why Jesus had so many close followers, right? This is why there was so many few, because he as a human didn't have the ability and the time to have that connection with 10,000 people. And so the way he chose to, and we've gotten to this so many times, but the way he chooses to impact not just a small group of people, but the world is by focusing in and centering in, and not having as broad a scope. So I'm gonna cut myself off right there, because I know us. We can keep going forever. But one, I'll just say thank you if you're listening to this and being patient with us and being understanding. Hopefully, Jason will get some good news back here in a few weeks, and his granuloma will be shrunk or gone, or what's the term?
I'll take either of those.
Shrunk or gone.
Preferably
shrunken.
Gone.
I don't know what the proper term would be, but that he's healed and that's better. So if you would pray for that would be awesome. And we're just gonna kind of take it week by week. If Jason's voice is obviously atrophied to a certain degree, and there are gonna be times when he's spoken a lot before in the past week and it's just not going to be good for him, or maybe who knows. And so we're asking for patience, and because we know we're anticipating that acceptance. So I'm saying thank you for that acceptance. But I hope this conversation was interesting to you. I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated that there was these small clarifications, but it wasn't this massive, it wasn't a massive upheaval for Jason. So basically what I'm getting at is, man, are those monks just punking us, or
they're all a fraud.
They're all a fraud, or they're like me, where they're like, man, I just get to go and do my gardening, and I don't have to listen. I don't have to talk to anybody, or whatever it may be.
Now, I do want to be clear. If somebody had come to me in the middle of that time and said, Jason, this is now your life, I would have a very different story to tell. So for the record, I think that's the big dividing line from me and the monks. There's other dividing lines, but that's the big one.
You don't have a cool haircut.
Truth.
No, I'm just kidding. Thank you for listening. Grace, peace, and love.